Let's get it. Blackhawks fans, welcome back. Holy hell, it's been too freaking long. But Four Feathers Podcast is back on the air. I am Ron Luce. You all know who I am. I am not a stranger. Maybe some of you, the next guy might be a stranger, but that's okay. He will be your friend soon enough. I am joined tonight by my guy, Steve at Dirty Third 81 on X. Steve, you've been writing with us, for about 2 months now? Maybe a little longer than that even?
Yeah, I'd say about 2 months. It was like right before the Winter Classic. So
Incredible
yeah.
timing, right? We
Yeah.
got you on just in time for the new year. But we're excited to have you, man. This was supposed to be a three-man show. Boss man, Mr. Tony Marchese, was supposed to join us tonight. Unfortunately, when you have children, I've learned of any age, they attract germs like they're sponges. And he's just been sick all winter. So this is no different than any other time. But we're back. Long-awaited show here at Four Feathers Podcast. As always, at Four Feathers Pod on the socials. Any likes, rates, and reviews of good standing on where you listen to your favorite podcast, we certainly appreciate. But Steve, before we talk anything Blackhawks hockey, we need to talk about yourself, my friend, because there's a lot of people out there that might not know you. There's a lot of people that probably do listen to our show that are familiar with your work, even pre-joining us here at On Tap, and we've obviously been super excited to have you as a part of our team now. But just tell everybody out there, what moment made you become a part of this sicko fan base that is the Blackhawks? And because you don't live in Chicago, I think that's a very notable piece of information.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Originally from the area, I was born in Chicago and then raised out in the suburbs. But I live all the way in California now in the middle of the desert. So, yeah. And the reason why I guess I'm a Blackhawks fan is it was the Cup runs, 2010 specifically, that got me really into the Blackhawks. And then I joined the military right after that. One of my good friends was a huge Penguins fan, and he kept giving me shit about not knowing enough about hockey. So I was like, I gotta really study up on this, and just fell in love with the sport. So yeah, here I am, still a Hawks fan, still love hockey. So yeah.
You let a sicko Penguins fan drag you into this. It sounds exactly like me. One of my best friends is a Penguins fan. You and I talked about this off air. But very nice, man. Yeah. Hey, I feel like, I'm kind of in the same boat. My fandom really began the year prior to the first cup. Them being back on TV, like Savvy's first year was my real taste of Blackhawks action. And then I liked hockey. Like as a kid, I went to a ton of Wolves games because they were really good in the early 2000s, and this, that, and the other. And so finally, made it to my first Hawks game in 2008 and never looked back. So I'm right there with you. Just became a diehard sicko and didn't know what else to do with yourself. So I totally feel that. We got some comments here. Our friend Tamina too. As I live and breathe, I know we got a direct message from Tom, and he was like, does Four Feathers still exist, or did you guys die? I was like, we died temporarily, but we're coming back. We're coming back, and we are back. So appreciate you guys jumping in the comments. Our boy Stokes. Hello, Mr. Stokes, as he says, dudes. Well, Steve, again, we're super pumped to have you as a part of our team. We're excited to have you as a part of the podcast now. We'll see you quite a bit now through the rest of the season and into the summer. So hopefully people, if you haven't already, again, at Dirty Third 81 on the socials, go follow Steve, give him some love. His writing's awesome. He has brought life to our Blackhawks recaps because your satire and humor are fantastic. And again, just awesome work. So we've been excited to have you as part of the team. This has been long overdue. For those at home that are wondering what the hell took Four Feathers so long to get back in the air, just a lot of crazy changes at On Tap. Not necessarily anything bad per se. A lot of new faces we've brought in, which has been great. It's been a breath of fresh air to the team. A lot of great writers, a lot of great contributors. Steve, you were a part of that kind of crop. So again, Tony and myself and even Johnny, historically, we've all been heavily involved in other aspects of On Tap Sportsnet. So Four Feathers suffers when other things get busy, and that's exactly what's happened. So we're not going anywhere, just a small hiatus due to some scheduling conflicts, but we're back. And now we got Steve. So Steve can be thrown to the fire if we need to do an emergency podcast or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Neither here nor there, my friend. But where we stand, because as I was telling you before we started the show, it's been a while since we did a show. Early January was the last time we did a show. It was like right after the Winter Classic. The Hawks since then are no longer 32nd in the NHL, now 31st in the NHL with 41 points. But ironically, they are 4-6-5 since our last show, which I think is a really weird stat line. They're 4-11 in theory, but they've gone to overtime and lost 5 times.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely bonkers to me. So I thought that was a fun fact to add. Obviously, Ryan Donato leads the team in goals right now at the Four Nations break. That's another reason why we're doing a show kind of on an off night like we are tonight. 19 goals for Ryan Donato thus far. Bedard leads the team in assists and points, 33 and 49 respectively. Notably, Teuvo Teravainen's obviously having a great season, 40 points so far in the 55 games that the Hawks have played now. And the recent stretch for Bedard, 23 points in 22 games for Connor Bedard. That dates back to, I believe it's December 21st was the first game of that stretch. It was against Calgary in Calgary. Way back at the beginning of the Anders Sorensen era, which we're going to get to here in a minute. But Steve, I guess we've obviously been talking to you amongst our internal circle of Four Feathers podcast. And, Tony's been sharing thoughts. You've been sharing thoughts. Just kind of what do you feel about the team really since the Winter Classic in terms of how they've played, kind of you as a spectator, what have you enjoyed, if there is anything you've enjoyed, kind of what are some of those just initial, like, this is kind of how I feel about the team right now, especially while we're at a break here, like we are with the Four Nations face-off.
I'm going to be honest. It's kind of like you're watching this team and it is what it is. When Anders Sorensen was hired, I was like kind of hoping to see something different, which, we did. But sometimes it's like you're still seeing a lot of the same things that they've been doing with Luke Richardson. So I don't even get frustrated anymore. I'm just like, just kind of accepting it.
It's smart. It's good for the mental health to just accept it.
Yeah, you got to.
It really has been that way, man. I can relate to that with you. I think just kind of the nature of where the team stands, we're beyond the point of no return, right? Like everybody knows what this team is. It's still very much a work in progress. I think the thing I've at least been happy about, and I kind of want to know if you agree or disagree, and if you do disagree, not a problem at all. Please do disagree with me. I'm at least encouraged by majority of the offseason additions and what they've done so far.
Okay.
I like what Tyler Bertuzzi's brought to the team. I know he hasn't been a perfect player by any means, but still the guy's on pace for 20 to 25 goals at $5.5 million in today's NHL. I'll take that, especially for a guy who, with hopefully more talent on the team in the next couple of seasons, I would expect those numbers to either improve or, hey, you're putting up 40 points a season, but you're a third line player, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Teuvo Teravainen's been great, second leading scorer on the team so far, as all things stand at the break. Obviously we've yet to see Laurent Brossoit. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Alec Martinez has been fine when he's been on the ice. Maroon and Smith are what they are. They're $1 million a piece, but they've brought, some leadership. I think they've helped instill a lot of confidence in Lucas Reichel, which I think is important for maybe not so much the rest of this season, but I think next year, because that's the contract year for him. And in my opinion, the real do or die year. So I think at least especially in this recent stretch, especially with how well Teuvo's played, the little bit of a heater that Bertuzzi had kind of around year end into January, it gives me hope that, like, okay, sure, you didn't fix everything in one offseason, and rarely can you when they tear it down as much as they did. But at least the guys you brought in are, especially the guys that are on a multiple year deals, are performing kind of as I expected them to. And at least to me, that's encouraging.
Yeah. I agree with that mostly. Like Tyler Bertuzzi, that's kind of how he is. Like, he's started slow before. And my thing with him is like he's not a huge consistent point producer.
Mm-hmm.
My thing with what Davidson did in the offseason was not necessarily, I mean, I guess it is kind of tied into it, but his expectations that he set. When he said like, hey, we're not going to finish bottom three. And then these are the players that he went out and got.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like where, it didn't like make me lose my faith in him or anything, but it's like you pick these players and they're not currently meeting your goal. Like we're in 31st place right now. Yeah.
No,
That's kind of how I feel.
I think that's a great point because that's something that Tony and I have had off microphone discussions about. It's probably good that we've had off mic conversations about because Tony and I can get heated when we get into these talks because he goes full off the deep end and I'm the one that has the fishing pole that's trying to reel him back up and it just gets all over the place. But I agree with what you have to say, right? Like it's hard to come out and be like, we're not going to be a bottom feeder team. Like Tavo was a great addition. Don't get me wrong. He's a top 6 forward, even still in the league at his age. He was playing huge minutes in Carolina. Like he was a meaningful point producer on a very good Carolina Hurricanes team for a long time. So he's surely not at the end of his career where like I'm worried about his point production dropping off in the next 2 years. He's doing what I expect him to do. But at this point in his career, you also know he's not a game changer in the sense of, oh, he's going to come in and, he's guaranteed to be a 30-goal scorer or something of that nature, right? He certainly is a guy that, because of his past first nature, depends on a lot of other guys to put up his points because he's a setup man. That's what he does. In addition, I agree with you. I think the Bertuzzi signing was like, well, Bertuzzi's going to be the guy. And it's like, yeah, this guy had 30-goal seasons in Detroit. So, like, with a lot of playing time, he can put up numbers. But it just, over the last handful of seasons, this was a guy that played typically on a 2-line or a 3-line. And I think that's probably his best position for what he does. But I agree with you. It's been a rough look. And I think a big reason why a lot of people have metaphorically jumped off the deep end when it comes to being Blackhawks fans this year, because of it was Kyle Davidson set the expectation at least up here. Now, Stanley Cup's way the hell up here. We're not even going to get to that yet. But at least he set it up here. And right now it's down here. And I think that's been the frustration of a lot of people. And I think that's totally fair. In addition here, stole it with a great comment. Brody has been consistently horrible. Warm body, right? Like some of these guys, I think we knew when they signed, like, oh, this dude's just, you're a placeholder. Like TJ Brody is the placeholder for Labshinov / Korchinski / whoever. Same goes for Martinez. Like they clearly, which I applaud Davidson for at least saying, you know what, we're going to get veteran blood in here on the blue line. So that way, at least, worst case scenario, we only maybe have 1 or 2 young guys playing up instead of 4 at any given moment. Because we saw that a little bit last year, especially kind of probably about this time of the season, right? I remember the Isaac Phillips, Crevier third pair with Korchinski and a half-broken Connor Murphy as your second pairing. Like, I remember those days. And then it was Vlasic and Jones playing 25 minutes a night. Like that was how they played defense for a lot of last season because of the injuries. So I think that's applaudable. But I'm right there with you. If we're talking where Kyle Davidson established the expectation, there's reason to be upset.
Yeah, and you're saying it's applaudable because he got veterans to play with the younger guys, correct?
Yes. And more so just guys that have been there and know what to do. Because to me, in my opinion, it allows – I said this last offseason, and I got a lot of shit for it in the summer. I said the best place for Kevin Korchinski is Rockford.
Okay.
And I didn't mean it in a bad way. It's just he's either going to play in Chicago and play 18 minutes a night, or he can go down to Rockford and play 23 minutes a night, but he's going to play in every situation. It's the Alex Vlasic treatment. I wanted him to go down and be the guy in Rockford because if he makes a mistake, oh well. Like Nobody on the Rockford Ice Hogs was going to get fired if Kevin Korchinski made a mistake. Clearly at the NHL level, very different story. You know what I mean? So it allowed
Yeah.
the young D-men, especially because D-men take longer to develop in general, in addition, you let Kevin Korchinski go down there and be the guy on defense. You let him play with Artem Levshinov a little bit. You let those guys just go down and play and get better and improve, because quite frankly, I think could have derailed Korchinski's development this year. And we saw when he came up, he looked better. He had better positioning, had a better defensive presence about him. Still not perfect,
No.
but you saw the steps it took. And that's why I applaud Kyle Davidson. It wasn't, well, we have Kevin Korchinski. It's going to answer all these questions. Like, no, the kid needs to go develop. And this is the first year he can finally go to Rockford. Let him go to Rockford. I think last year was great. He got his feet wet in the NHL and knows what it takes. But then he's able to go down and really work on the parts of his game that were very clearly deficiencies a year ago. And he can do that because even though he is consistently horrible, I completely agree with that statement, because of guys like TJ Brody and Alec Martinez being at the NHL level to let those guys do their thing down in the AHL.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was kind of on the opposite side of that at the start of the season. I totally understand why Korchinski was sent to the AHL. I wasn't upset about it at all. I think a lot of fans can agree after watching him last season. He needed a lot of work defensively.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was like, and just for anybody who doesn't understand, like he couldn't play in Rockford last year because of his contract with the CHL. So it's not like last year he could play in the AHL. He couldn't. But he spent a whole year playing with the Blackhawks last year. And for me, it's like, hey, he's got that whole year under his belt. Why not, like, let him start in the NHL and then kind of see where he's at. But
Fair.
I see the other side of it where it's like you just let him go down to Rockford. But I don't know. I was not happy with the TJ Brody signing. I think he's like, what, 2 years is what he
2
signed
years,
on
yeah.
for. Yeah. And it's just like I'd rather see like another young kid in his spot. Like to me, he's like blocking somebody from playing with like another rookie instead.
I think
I don't know, that's me.
there's opportunity for next year where if this blue line comes along far enough, Brody is absolutely the seventh defenseman, and I don't think there's anybody that's going to bat an eye about that. I think Kyle Davidson will tell you right now, if Brody's their seventh D-man, that's a good problem, because it means the kids in Rockford have outplayed him. And I think they're totally okay with that. Like, I've seen some fans kind of think like, well, they have all these veterans, and like, are we always just going to give the veterans time? It's like, no, if a young kid comes and supplants somebody, they'll let him. Frank Nazar did that, right? Like, they're very clear about like, hey, if you outperform the AHL, you're going to get a look. I think just there haven't been a lot of guys who have outperformed it. And in fairness, though, and this kind of segues us a little perfectly into our next topic, and that's just some of the movement that we've seen since our last episode. Ethan Del Mastro's come up and looked really good for the Hawks so far. And I know people are like, well, he just got sent down. It's because they want him to play during the Four Nations break because he's young. Great move. But like, he's been good. Landon Slaggert's been a boost to the lineup since he's been called up. I've loved what he's done at the NHL level. I think he still has like another year of like figuring out what he like kind of hone in on what kind of NHLer he is. But this guy's going to be a middle six forward, I think, for the next 5 to 7 years. Like, I think he could be that kind of player. And then a guy like Colton Dock, who we've seen come up a little bit and shown some flashes, especially in terms of physicality, has a little bit of a scoring touch. We've seen him have some chances. But obviously he went back down because they said, hey, kid, we got feedback for you. Go work on it. Hopefully we'll see you before the season's over. Now, granted, you wrote about it just this last week. He's banged up. Drew Comasso's banged up. So some guys are a little delayed in terms of when we may see them again at the NHL level, and maybe it's not even this season. Maybe they just stay down and hopefully make the playoffs with Rockford and continue moving on. And actually, I don't even know where they stand, so we're going to look that up as we discuss this. But I think, but because of some of that movement, it's allowed for, these kids to get, some good looks, which I think is super, super important in the grand scheme of it all.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to see Del Mastro up here. I was a little bummed out when Doc got sent out. Not that it's like make or break or anything like that, but they told him that you need to be more physical. I can't remember what the stat was. He was leading all the players in hits per game. Um, had the highest hit rate. So from what I was seeing in the numbers, it wasn't really aligning with like, hey, like they're saying that he needs to go be more physical, and then they sent him down to Rockford. But I don't know. That's just me nitpicking.
No, I think it's fair. I think what I saw, because I think if I remember correctly, I was at the second to last game that Doc was up. The physicality had certainly dropped off from his debut, because I was at his debut game as
Mm-hmm.
well against Montreal. He was buzzing against Montreal. He was noticeable. He was
Yeah.
getting to the high danger areas. And then, yeah, he was still racking up hits, but they weren't, what's the term I'm looking for? I don't want to say high percentage hits, but I guess impactful hits, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
They were very like, oh, behind the play, he makes a check, and like not like on the forecheck, getting in, digging out a puck. I think that's what the Hawks wanted to see more of.
Right.
Because I remember their verbiage being physicality is a choice. It's one thing to be physical when it doesn't matter to the play. It's another thing to be physical when it does matter to the play. And to me, I think that's what the Hawks wanted to see more of Doc do, is be more of a power forward, I think, than just like another guy. Because let's be honest, they don't really have a true power forward for the foreseeable future.
No.
Bertuzzi, I guess, is the closest thing they have to that. But outside of Bertuzzi, Maroon and Smith aren't going to be around for the long haul. Like they don't have a Brandon Saad or an Andrew Shaw or somebody that can play kind of a power forward-esque game outside of a guy maybe like Colton Dock. And I think that's why they wanted to see some more of that. But that's just my 2 cents. I could be totally off my rocker, but that's, I think, based on what I saw, at least kind of how I would justify what their feedback was.
Yeah, it's like the whole eye test versus fancy stats thing. And the number I
Exactly.
was looking at, it was generating, and this is going to be inflated because of how little he played this season, but 16.33 hits per 60 minutes. The next highest was Nick Foligno with 9.88 hits per 60 minutes. Again, small sample size on Doc's part, but stood out to me.
Definitely. I think there's a chance we still see him again this year.
Oh, for sure.
Especially given how like what Landon Slaggert has done since he's come up and kind of been a jolt of sorts to the
Yeah.
lineup. I think there's a chance that Doc sees that and goes, I want to be a part of that. And then they bring him up maybe for the last like 10 games of the season or something like that. Because mind you, there's also a very good chance that we're going to see some of the college guys sign with the Hawks too
Yep.
before the season's over, depending on how deep in the tournament they go. Obviously, we saw it with Nazar. Michigan went deep into the tournament. He only gets a couple of games at the end of the year, whereas Notre Dame got knocked out in the middle of March. We saw Slaggert for 12, 13 games down the stretch, which was awesome because everybody got a real feel for what he was as a hockey player, before the season started. Rather, when Nazar, there was a lot of questions and there was a lot of hype built up because of that first game against Carolina. And even though he played well on the last West Coast trip, it wasn't, I think, quite what people were hoping for. And so then people, of course, make up their own storylines and whatnot. But speaking of all of that, this is all being managed right now by Anders Sorensen, as you brought up. And
Yep.
you wrote a phenomenal article. And if anybody hasn't read it yet, because you've unplugged from the world of hockey during the break, I'm guilty of that as myself. Head over to OnTapSportsNet.com and check it out. It's evaluating Anders Sorensen's tenure so far as Blackhawks head coach. I believe it's 29 games, if I remember
Yep,
correctly,
20,
Steve?
29. Yeah.
29 games. I want to give you the floor. And
Yeah.
just what are just don't give all the goodies away. They have to go check out the article. But I want to know some of your 2 cents on just what the Sorensen era has been like so far this year in your eyes.
Yeah, so I mean, Richardson made it to 27 games before he got the boot. And initially when Sorensen took over, something that caught my eye was they looked like they were playing faster.
Mm-hmm.
When he said like he wanted the defenseman to get more involved in the OZ, Like we saw that with like Korchinski when he was called up here for a little bit. So those were like some of the systematic things that I've seen with Sorensen.
Sure.
And I was kind of surprised to see like the underlying numbers at 5-5. They haven't really changed, which it shouldn't be that much of a surprise because like since day one of this season, I've thought that the Hawks' problem wasn't necessarily a coaching issue; it was more of a roster construction issue. Um, and just like Richardson had, where he had trouble generating shot attempts, shots on goal. Sorensen's the same way. And Richardson, throughout his 27 games, he had a 45 Corsi, which ranked last in the league. Sorensen, he has with the Blackhawks playing under him, they have a 44, still 32nd. So I mean, like all
they
the
were bad
fancy
already, and
stats and
they're
all that
just
stuff, they haven't
still
really
bad.
changed. But like the one good thing that I've noticed is that Sorensen seems to give the younger players more freedom, especially with Connor Bedard. So I think like he's letting Bedard play more of his game, which kind of attracted a lot of negative attention recently, I guess. But Sorensen, I don't think is like wanting him to focus on defense because that really shouldn't be a thing for Bedard. That'll come. That shouldn't be anybody's worry. But yeah, that's kind of where I feel about Sorensen so far. I don't know if you got anything to say to that or yeah.
I think you've nailed it. They're doing nothing that's world beating. Like they've shown that they can run with good teams. They've done it all season, albeit maybe not getting the results that we would all like. But I think the recent Edmonton game was a perfect example of that, pushing it all the way to an overtime and coming back and having two really good chances late to win it over, again, a really good hockey team. They've shown what they can do. The underlying numbers do not like the Blackhawks, which understandably so. The regular numbers don't like them either. But I agree with you. I think just a faster pace of hockey. I think it's made the brand of hockey more enjoyable to watch because Richardson was so defense first, whereas Sorensen's been a lot more just run and gun and try to score goals. And Stolen says it perfectly here. Anders knows he needs to score more goals to win games, but they don't seem to play hard for him at times. More blowouts under Anders, less defense awareness. And that's something we knew we were going to see. I remember distinctly discussing that with Johnny on this microphone. As soon as the coaching change happened, that's the number one thing we saw. It was, well, this means there's going to be more blowouts. Like the Hawks are going to lose 7-2 more often, but it's going to be a more interesting and fun pace of hockey to kind of, watch and see. So that is obviously something that they're going to have to deal with for now. But I think you nailed it, man. I really do. I don't think there's, I don't think there's anything else I really have to add from a Sorensen standpoint. We do have a couple more topics that I am prefacing to everybody that's listening that we want to get to. So stick with us. There's been a lot of great commentary, and a lot of the comments apply to these, and that's why I haven't shown them yet. So we're going to get to them when we get to them. But the first thing I want to get to is a comment here from Tom from a little bit earlier. He said, this was dating back to when we talked about the Winter Classic. He said that was his lowest point of the season. He's felt a lot more hopeful. Young players doing well. They're fighting a lot harder. I agree for the most part. General eye test, like the young guys are getting their time. And that's, I think, what's most important. And it's exactly what you alluded to, Steve. So glad that we were able to kind of touch on that. But the next piece, we got to talk about what's happening right now. Obviously, the Blackhawks didn't have a ton of representation, so I think there's probably a lot of Hawks fans that maybe haven't watched the tournament, which is tragic if you haven't. At very least, on Thursday night, tune into the championship game because the Four Nations face-off has been a slam dunk for the NHL. I've seen enough daytime sports talk television to know that the NBA is freaking out because the NHL just did laps around them over the course of their All-Star weekend, where a G League player, once again, won a dunk contest instead of watching USA Canada. And it was the most televised hockey event in terms of viewership, not a Stanley Cup final since pre-COVID. Like, it was a big deal on Saturday night, US versus Canada. I think especially amidst the political tension between the two countries right now.
Yeah.
I think that kind of upped the ante a little bit of nationalism kind of bleeding into a lot of these guys. But it's made for incredible television. Canada won today, so they've locked up their spot in the championship game. I know it's not a gold medal per se, but it has that feel of a gold medal game on
Yeah.
Thursday night in Boston against the USA. USA playing right now as we're recording this show. They're playing Finland. Or no, I'm sorry, they're playing Sweden. They're playing Sweden. Finland played Canada earlier today. So Teuvo Teravainen was on Team Finland. He actually sat today's game. So Teuvo's tournament's over. He played literally, I think, one game the whole tournament. Kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. What has your reflection been on the Four Nations face-off? Because for me personally, I think it's been awesome. I think it's been great for hockey. I think they should continue to do weird, crazy shit like this. They talked about the World Cup of Hockey coming back, which I think is awesome. That's a huge win because I think Team North America this year would have been so much fun with Bedard and all these young kids that didn't make Team USA or Team Canada. What is just your takeaway right now from all of this? Has the NHL hit a slam dunk? What would you have done to maybe improve the tournament? But just what are your takeaways right now from the Four Nations face-off?
I think it's it surprised me. Honestly, I thought it was just gonna be a glorified All-Star game. And like the All-Star game, like nobody like really cares about that stuff. And like you said, like with the NBA this past weekend, like the slam dunk contest was kind of a joke. And it's usually how it is like with all these other sports. But when the players are like saying that they're invested in these games and then they like right off the bat, literally no holds barred. Like literally, I think in 9 seconds, it was 3 fights when the U.S. played against Canada on Saturday. That was that was kind of surprising. So it's kind of exceeded my expectations for this tournament by a lot. And I'm glad the NHL did it. I was pretty skeptical at first, but it's been a slam dunk. It's good hockey too. It's not just like, I don't know, like weak hits or anything. Like these guys actually care. They care about playing for the country. And like you said, with like the whole like political backdrop to these games, specific to Canada and the US, it's there's a lot of energy. You could feel it through your TV when they were playing in Montreal on Saturday. And for me personally, like my mom, she's from Canada. I have a lot of family in Canada. So it's been kind of fun in the family group chat. But yeah, it's I don't know. I'm having a blast watching these games, which is surprising for me.
They've been incredible, man. I agree with you. I think a lot of people had the feeling that this was just going to be a glorified All-Star game. And so everybody was like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, this is like cool, whatever. Like the 2 weeks where we've become accustomed to, I think, in the NHL, right? Obviously, the guys in history, have gone to the Olympics and things like that. So, like, this 2-week break is nothing new to hockey fans. Like, this is habitual almost at times in certain seasons. But yeah, these games have superseded the expectation, I think, that a lot of people had. It's been high, like you said, high intensity hockey. I think the Canada-US matchup alone has been so intriguing because the way that I've seen a lot of like people describe this USA team, like I saw this one hockey podcast, and they're based out of Canada, and they were like, there's something about this US team, like they're just swaggy, and they know it, and they're playing with energy, and they're playing with purpose, and like damn well the Johnny Gaudreau thing has sent a surge through this USA team, an absolute surge. Like they're playing for more than just country at this point. They're playing for their boy that isn't able to join them because of something terrible that happened. The amount of emotion, and then the Bell Center booing the United States national anthem in Canada, and then the Kachuk brothers running wild to begin that game. Was just it set the stage for honestly just one of the best hockey games, period, I think that anybody's watched in a long time. It was back and forth action. There was very few mistakes. I joked with you beforehand. I'm not used to watching hockey where they're in the D zone. And I look at my phone really quick and they're in the O zone 2 seconds later.
Yeah.
I'm not used to that. We watch Blackhawks, right? You don't see that every day anymore. But man, oh man, it has been something freaking special to watch.
It's good for the league too. It's got a ton of people who don't normally watch hockey talking about it. Like a lot of friends on social media, like they're tuning into this game. When I saw the first period of the Saturday game, it was like at a bar in San Diego, and like it was on TV, and people are like, "Oh shit, this is cool." So like it gets people watching hockey, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been freaking cool, man. I'm right there with you. I love it so much. Got a good comment here from our friend Still at Breezing. Says the Four Nations players are playing for country and pride. They want to be there. Says the NBA All-Star, nobody wants to be there. These NBA guys get paid to sit on the sidelines. He says like the All-Star game is like skipping vacation time. Guarantee contracts, he says, have ruined the NBA. I think too, just like Draymond Green on the broadcast of the All-Star game said the All-Star game sucks. And it's because it's unchanged. Like they try to do these little things that like try to make it better, but like none of them want to be there. None of them want to play in this. I agree. When you pump a little bit of nationalism into these guys, it's a whole different world. And like you said, right? Like big hits. There's no weak checking in this game. Brady Tkachuk almost sent Drew Doughty through the freaking boards the one night on that check on Saturday night. Yeah. And they're balling out. Guys are getting hurt. Like if I'm an NHL team, this tournament scares the absolute fuck out of me because like the Tkachuk brothers are both hurt and everybody's like their teams are in playoff positions. What the fuck are we doing? But for the hockey fan, like you're bubbling at your mouth like you're rabid because of these games. You're like, oh yeah, this is great hockey, old time hockey. Let's go. You know, it gets people fired up. And you know what? I'll tell you this. I think it's been great for the league, like you said, Steve, because it's got people that don't historically watch hockey talking about hockey again. And for a sport that is probably more accessible than ever because of the ESPN and Turner contract for media rights and being available on ESPN Plus all over the country. And not even needing like Hulu TV to watch all these games. As long as you got ESPN Plus, you can watch any live hockey game. The whole season, unless you're in market, which I suffer with in Chicago. But now, like, people have a reason because people are going to go, who are these Tkachuk characters? I bet you Ottawa Senator and Florida Panthers games are going to be more watched now than ever before because people have seen them on the international stage. And I can't wait for Thursday night's game. Thursday night's game is going to be a spectacle. Like, I am so fired up to watch that game. It's going to be unfreaking believable because we get a rematch of Canada-US. You don't think they're still pissed off at each other from Saturday? Oh, it's going to be awesome. Absolutely awesome. I'm so ready for it. I don't know about you. I'm
ready.
There is not a single non-Blackhawks hockey game that I've been more excited for in the last like 10 years.
Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah. No, it's like so watching the Stanley Cup every year is fun, but like you're invested in this. Like you have a tie to the game. Like, and it's, there's no Blackhawks players playing it. Like
that's the best part about it.
Yeah.
It's a break from Blackhawks hockey. Because again, like these are some of the best guys in the league for their respective countries, right? Like JT Miller, the Tkachuk brothers, Jack Hughes is like the 11th forward on this team. And he's a franchise player in New Jersey. Like, that's fun when you got that, how deep of a team. Canada's the same way. We get to watch McDavid, McKinnon, and Crosby skate together sometimes. We're never going to get to see that ever again, because Sid's only got a couple years left. So it's like these games, like it just, oh man, they've lived up to the hype, and it's been cool. It's been really, really cool to watch. Very excited for Thursday, and certainly something that we'll be talking about probably, I'm sure, on our next episode sometime next week. When Blackhawks hockey returns to our airwaves as of the 22nd. Steve, we've got 3 more things to talk about here before we get to our habitual segments at the end of the show. One of them, it was inspired actually by a question in the comments. So that one we are saving for the very last. Okay. But right now I want to play the way too early trade deadline game with you because it's coming a lot faster than we realize. Like I say, it's way too soon, but think about this. Games resume on February 22nd. per NHL action. Blackhawks will be in Columbus. We'll touch on that at the end of the show. You got one more weekend, and then that following Friday is the trade deadline. So we are really like a little over 2 weeks out right now. Not quite 2 weeks, but under 3 weeks from the NHL trade deadline.
Yeah.
I think a lot of stuff's going to happen as soon as this Four Nations break is over. I bet you after Thursday night, shit starts happening. I think a lot of people have just been like, hey, we're going to unplug and just enjoy it. And front offices will get back to work. I've got four names here. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, because trades, they're not paused during this break. So I'm actually a little surprised I haven't seen anything, but yeah.
I almost think some of the front offices are just as dialed into this as others are, and they're just like, no. I'll call you on the 22nd. Like, let's let this play out first. They all got side bets of Canadian guys betting with the U.S. guys. They all got gentleman bets on the line here. I've got four names for you though that could potentially be moved at the deadline. I want to know: do you think they are moved, and do you want to see them move? The first guy I know your feelings on because you wrote a great article about him, but we're going to talk about him anyway. His name's Ryan Donato. 19 goals, 37 points, already establishing career highs as this is like his seventh year, I think, in the NHL now. He's been around for a while. Came out at a very young age out of college.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's his seventh year. But I'm torn on it because I'm going to start with like how I feel, and I feel like we should keep him just because like he's a good player. If you keep him, that's continuity for the next season. You kind of need that. I have a feeling like there's going to be some more changes in this off season. And you don't want to keep like making these big changes and, don't have any other players that had played with this old team from the prior season. And I think Donato brings some of that. And he cares about this team. He cares about this sport. He's good for the young guys. Like I would love to see him come back, but I think what makes sense is I think trading him, but also you got to think too, like what's the return that he's going to get you? And like if his return, which is realistically probably like a third round pick, is like, to me, that's almost like you're making a trade just to make a trade. And it's good to stockpile on all these draft picks, but like, I don't know, we got plenty. So
eventually
I'm
them.
torn on him. Yeah. And you got to start using them. I'm torn on him, but if I had a pick, I'd keep him.
No, I think that's fair. I think there's a lot of fans that feel the same way. I like Ryan Donato. I distinctly recall being one of the few people that was legitimately excited when he signed with the Blackhawks. I thought it was a great move. Getting him at $2 million a year, I knew was going to be a steal because of what he does. He plays all three forward spots. He can kill penalties. He can play the power play. He might not be the best option there per se, but he can still do it and do it effectively. This year, obviously having a career season. But I think what was most impressive about him was he kind of found a role in Seattle where he became a really reliable depth scoring option. And we all know that depth scoring in the NHL is very hard to come by, especially unless you got like Patrick Sharp skating on your second or third line. Depth scoring's hard. You need those guys that can, play more limited minutes, but still make an impact offensively. And Donato's done that. He's done that for multiple years. And I saw something, I'm going to give love to these folks, the Chicago Tomahawks podcast. DM'd with them a number of times on social. Great guys. But they discussed the idea of, trading him, and guys that are 20 goal scorers have a tendency to drop off if they're not historically guys that put up those kind of numbers. And they cited Taylor Radish as an example, and I think it's a fair example. Had his one weird outlier season of 20 goals in Chicago a couple of years ago. Since then has scored 10 combined goals, including 5 goals in Washington this season. The difference being, though, Donato's got a little bit more of a proven track record. Outside of only 50 games played in San Jose during the shortened, COVID season, obviously, where he still put up 20 points. He had 14 goals before the shutdown in Minnesota, his last season with the Wild. But then with the Kraken in 21-22 put up 16 goals and then 14 goals in Seattle the year prior or the year following, and then 12 goals last season to put up 19 this year. This is his fourth consecutive season of 10 plus goals on teams where he isn't always playing in the top six. In fact, more often than not, he's not playing in the top six. And I think that there's something so just impressive and important to be said about that. But that being said, I think he gets you better than the third round pick. And the reason I say this is because Taylor Hall got you a third round pick. So my hope is that, especially when you look at it, he is the third highest goal scoring option that's a pending free agent this season in the NHL. Those guys should be hot commodities at the deadline. And in addition to that, this is considered one of the weaker drafts. Teams are much more willing to move higher draft capital for this year's draft than any other year we've seen in recent years because it's not a super deep draft.
Yeah.
Who's to say a team that's a Stanley Cup contender doesn't say, look, we know you're getting other calls on Ryan Donato because he's a really good hockey player, but we could use him. We'll give you our first this year and maybe like a 26th fourth or something to get Donato. And at that point, you look at your Kyle Davidson, you go, well, fuck it. Okay. We'll add another first round pick to the cupboard. Sure. No problem. Or maybe you can convince a team to give you a future first. So that way, we've heard Kyle Davidson mention the staggering of picks, right? He doesn't want all picks in 1 year. He likes to stagger them out. Maybe you get a 1 next year, a 1 the year after. And maybe at that point, that 1 becomes trade capital to improve the team rather than draft capital. So I think there's a possibility. I think he gets moved, but I'm in the same boat as you of like, if the price is right and the term is right, no more than 3 years, no more than maybe like $4.5 million a year, I would happily love to see Brian Donato come back because of what he does for the team. The next name I have, we'll bucket these two next names together. It's Maroon and it's Smith. My gut and soul knows they're getting traded. You're probably not getting much for him. It's probably like a conditional 7th round pick that can become a 6th rounder if the team makes it to the Stanley Cup type deal. But they're cheap. They're vets. They can play 4th line minutes for, these teams that are loaded with superstars. I think they're good as gone unless they tell Davidson otherwise. Do you see that being any different?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to agree with that. Honestly, I'm not gonna be surprised either way.
Fair.
If nobody wants them, that's who they are, and if they get traded, cool. I'm not gonna be surprised.
I agree. I don't think anybody's gonna get hurt or sad. The last name I have, and it'll lead into a couple of comments here. Lukas Reichel.
Oh,
he's been thrown around.
Yeah.
I have a feeling about Reichel that's kind of two-pronged. So I want to hear from you first. Do you think there is any chance in this world that Lukas Reichel gets moved at this year's trade deadline?
Man, you can't if you're Kyle Davidson, you're not going to just say nothing's off the table. I think Lukas Reichel getting traded would be a possibility. I don't think Davidson's going to want to do it, or I don't think he will do it, just because Reichel's kind of played himself into this, bottom 6 role, and I do think next year is going to be his last chance with the Hawks, whatever his future might be with this team. But yeah, I don't know. I don't see him getting traded, but man, that would be kind of something.
It's intriguing, right? It's something kind of crazy to think about. So Stola Breezing said move Reichel too. His names on the list were Donato, Kurashev, who I think is an interesting one to watch at this year's deadline. I think he's as good as on. He's an RFA this offseason. Martinez and Murphy. Martinez stole it for what it's worth. There was a Scott Powers report that came out probably about a month ago that stated that Kyle Davidson, the way he operates with the veterans, is he will explicitly ask them, do you want to go to a contender or not? From everything, it sounds like Martinez doesn't want to be moved. So he's probably not going to go anywhere unless somebody blows their socks off and Martinez okays it. But Murphy too, I think Murphy's just too hurt to get moved because he has term. He's not a guy that's like, oh, well, if he gets hurt and we gave up a mid-round pick for him, he just hits free agency. He's got another, I think it's 2 seasons after this one where he's under contract. At least 1 season. I think it's maybe 1 year after this. So there's some sizable financial commitment there for a team if they do take him on, because I think he's like $4.5 million for next year still. So something to consider, but I think there's some interesting names there. Obviously, there's also been the reports, and this has been since we last recorded, so I think it's fair to bring these up, that the Blackhawks are exploring the idea of bringing in a veteran, a guy who maybe expires after next season type deal where, hey, team, you have a high cap hit for this guy, but he doesn't make an actual lot of money. We're going to bring him in because we have the cap space. And a guy, I've heard like Anders Lee is a big name that's been thrown around. There's been a handful of other names as well that have been listed in there. I don't hate the idea of a guy like Anders Lee coming to the Blackhawks for a season, really, the season and some change at that point in the year. But it'll be interesting. I'm really intrigued to see what Kyle Davidson does at this year's deadline. And obviously, we'll have plenty of shows leading up to that. We'll have a show after that. And I believe the indication and anticipation is for Tony and I to be in person together the day of the deadline, which for anybody that may recall, that's where all the electric Ron Luce on Safari content came from, was a trade deadline day at Casa de Marchese. So maybe we'll bring back out the, Ron Luce on Safari to talk about some Blackhawks trades on March 7th. Two more things to talk about here, Steve. The first one being, I gotta let me give some credit and love here. I don't think the Hawks have faith that Reichel will ever figure it out. His flashes of talent might get a couple of teams to bite. See, I think Reichel has done a lot. I actually, when Dickinson got hurt against the Oilers, they moved Reichel up to play on that line with Teravainen and I believe who was playing that second line with him that night. Was it Foligno maybe? It might have been Foligno. They looked really good together. Like Reichel looked good. I think they've been keeping him on the fourth line just for him to learn defensive responsibility, with next year the anticipation of him being either a 2 or a 3 line center, because I think something's there still. He's also super young. Like, I know everybody wants to write off these hockey players at 21 years old, but Connor Bedard's one of the fastest players in NHL history to 100 points in 112 games. Like, Nathan MacKinnon didn't get there until 148 games. Now, Nathan MacKinnon's arguably the best player in hockey. These guys take time to develop.
Yeah.
So I think they've seen enough where I think he sticks around. I think next year, though, could be a huge year for Reichel, because in my opinion, if he plays third line center, let's say, and he plays to a 35-point season, I think he gets a 4-year deal at $3 million a year kind of deal. I could see that happening in a heartbeat, because he's got speed, but you can't teach speed. And you're starting to see it kind of come together at times where you're like, maybe there's something there. Who knows? But that's just my 2 cents.
I mean, if Reichel turns into, if that's what he is as a third line center, I'm happy. If that's where he's good at, I'm happy with that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't see Kyle Davidson giving up on him, because like you said, he's still young. Don't give up on a young player.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We'll have to wait and see. But our next topic, this one, our boy Tom was in the comments early tonight asking us to talk about this guy, and we added him to the rundown here at the last minute. He goes, God, I hope we talk about Nick Lardis tonight. The kid's been lighting it up. Yes, he has, folks. For people that have not kept up, Nick Lardis was the Blackhawks' 3rd-round pick in 2023. And I would like to make note, I am on record. You can go back to the show following the 2023 draft. And Tony and I talked about our prospects that we were most excited about, not named Connor Bedard in that draft. And Tony had cited guys like Oliver Moore, who was a part of that draft. And then later, obviously, I believe that was also the Roman Kanserov draft. And everybody was like, yeah, these guys are going to be good. And I was like, no. Keep an eye on the 3rd-round kid. Lardis put up 25 goals down the stretch when he got traded to a better OHL club, because Petersburg was he was the only guy there that was worth anything. 96 points, which is good for 2nd in the OHL as we speak today on Monday, February 17th. 1st in goals with 57. The only player that's sniffing him in either category is Michael Misa, who's possibly one of the top 3 or 4 NHL draft picks this coming year. So Lardis is having an outer worldly season so far, and a guy who's been, I think, fascinating Blackhawks fans. and everybody's real quick to write him into the lineup like now. Probably not realistic, but a guy that if he can be kind of that like 2020 guy at the next level, and I'd say that's a conservative estimate given the way he's scoring in the O. If he's a 2020 guy for his career as like a middle six forward, that's great value for a third round pick in the NHL and would be huge. I think that would be a huge, notch in Kyle Davidson's belt buckle as GM, getting a guy like that at that part in the draft. He had first round grades on him. That's why I was shocked that he slipped to the third round. There was people that saw him as one of the top 35 players in that draft. But it worked out. Worked out for the Blackhawks. They got a good player. What are your thoughts watching the Nick Lardis situation from afar? Because I feel like outside of the random Roman Kanserov highlight we get from the KHL, he's been the prospect that everybody has been following ad nauseum this season.
Every night you're seeing something about Lardis, like
Lardis scored. Shocking.
Like not even just scored. It's like, oh, he scored a hat trick, or he scored like his like another consecutive night of scoring a hat trick. I don't know if that happened, but it's exciting. I wasn't really too high on him when he was picked. I didn't care too much about him, to be honest. So this is like a huge surprise for me. But at the same time, it's like, is he somebody that's going to jump right into the like Blackhawks organization starting next year in the NHL? I don't think so. Especially with the way Davidson has been developing his players in Rockford. Like more than likely Lardis is going to go spend some time in Rockford first, unless like we were talking, unless like he knocks it out of the park in training camp, and like just impresses everybody. That would have to be a huge impression, but more than likely he'll be with Rockford next year. But either way, it's really exciting. And I want to see like these players that Davidson picked kind of turn into these players that we hope they're going to be. Because really other like than Bedard, which is like a given when he was drafted, everybody else is still developing. So
yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a thing where people have been like, oh, fire Kyle Davidson. It's like, it's really hard to fire a guy when like you don't know what his draft classes are going to be for probably 3 years from the first one, right? We're not even into 3 years from the first one yet. So, but again, this first draft is looking like it could pan out really well. Roman Kanserov has been really, really good. And granted, he can't come over until I believe it's after next season is when his KHL deal expires. But nonetheless, he's going to be like 22 years old, primed and ready to go. That could be a huge addition when he comes over. He probably will jump right into the NHL at that point. But even just as soon as next season, you could have guys like Oliver Moore and Lardis and Sam Renzel and Ryan Green, who is having a great year for Boston. Like you could have all these guys together in Rockford, hopefully putting up some good numbers. Artem Levshinov's got 8 points in his last 8 games. Is still at breezing points out here in the comments. He's starting to find his footing at the AHL level. There's a lot of intrigue and fun that can happen in Rockford. And it's not a bad thing for these kids to go to Rockford first. Now, if Lardis goes to Rockford and he scores 10 goals in like 8 games, you better believe that his ass is going to be up in the NHL almost immediately.
Call him up.
But I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, if he goes down, there's nothing wrong with him going down to Rockford and playing there. But if he plays really well, as we saw this year with Frank Nazar, you're going to get the call if you're playing well. So a guy that I'm excited to see, we'll probably get to see a little taste of him at the end of the OHL season with Rockford is my guess. And I think he's technically not available for playoffs, which sucks and is fucking stupid, but neither here nor there. But it'll be cool to see him in kind of some of those last Rockford games, I think, at the end of the year. Because there's a real chance that at the NHL level that we see guys like Oliver Moore, Sam Renzel, Ryan Green, maybe get a cup of coffee with the Hawks, especially once the trade deadline comes and some of these guys maybe move on and it might free up a couple of roster spots. But Nick Lardis having a massive season, a guy that we absolutely had to talk about here. I have one more thing for you, sir, before habitual segments, and it actually stemmed from a comment a little bit earlier from our buddy Tom. I hope he's still listening and watching along. But he asked, what are we thinking about 2025 offseason plans? Will the front office make a long-term massive hire? Is Ronson the type of guy they could bring in? I'm going to spring this one just completely on you, admittedly. I have some thoughts and opinions as well, but I just kind of wanted to see where your head's at of like, What do you think they accomplish in this coming offseason? Obviously, we still have a long time, right? The draft's not till the end of June. Free agency's not till July 1st. We might see a couple of trades in mid to late June if Davidson decides to go that route. But overall, once the trade deadline comes and goes, we're not going to see any movement probably until June.
Yeah.
But because we like to get ahead of ourselves, because it's how Blackhawk fans operate when the team's bad, what do you think they accomplish in the summer of 2025?
I think they're going to probably get a big free agent signing. You would hope, at least. I think after last summer, where there was I don't even want to say a lot of talk, because like when you're saying like, oh, we're not going to be bottom three, like, that's really nothing. But I think a lot of fans were let down. There's a lot of people who are kind of pissed off at, we're bad again. So I do think Kyle Davidson, he's going to try to get one of the big name free agents. Will it be somebody like Rantanen? I don't know. But I mean, like off the top of my head, I think Marner is going to be a free agent. Like there's players that could fit on this team, but that's pretty much it. Because like when you're looking at the roster, there's also not a lot of spots next year too. They only have like one or two extra spots that aren't filled with players that are signed on for next season. And you still want to have room for all the prospects that are going to be in Rockford. You want to make those call-ups, get them some time in the NHL. So like, I don't think he's going to make a ton of signings like he did last offseason, but I think he's going to make a big splash. It's just a matter of like, whoever that player is, like, are they going to want to come here? And like Kyle Davidson better be willing to like pay whatever money they want. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well put. I mean, next year is such a fascinating contract year. I'm going to preface that really quick. The players right now that are under contract for next season include Tyler Bertuzzi, Teuvo Teravainen, obviously, Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, Ilya Mikheyev, Lucas Reichel, Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, and then Landon Slaggert. His 2-year extension actually kicks in next season at that $900K number that he's getting. So realistically, assuming that Slaggert is a full-time NHLer, you have 9 forward spots consumed. The reason that that's interesting and kind of exciting is of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, there's only 3 of them that are technically under contract beyond next season. Obviously, Bedard and Nazar are going to get next contract. There's no surprise in that. So really, we'll call it 5. But Foligno's expiring, Dickinson's expiring, Mikheyev's expiring, Reichel's expiring. So there is going to be some space that opens. And I think if it's the right players, he's absolutely willing to let a prospect play 80 or 78 additional games or however many they play in the AHL for one more year, knowing that, injuries are going to happen and these guys are still going to get at least some looks probably at the NHL next year. There's a lot of opportunity because I look at, and that doesn't even just include defensemen, right? Crevier goes to free agency. Martinez will surely be going after this year. Again, if Brody's your 7th defenseman next year at $3.75 million, so fucking be it. Murphy's only got 1 more year, and then it's Vlasic and Jones signed until the end of time. There's a lot of opportunity to still bring guys on, and it's a good free agency class. You mentioned Marner already and Rantanen. If we're going by numbers in terms of scoring, they're the big 2 free agents. Marner's got 71 points in 54 games. Rantanen 64 points in 49 games. Both of them only 27 and 28 years of age, respectively. But it's a deep class. Matt Duchene, who for a contender for 1 year, he's got a great number. He's a point per game player at age 34 for the Dallas Stars. Nikolai Ehlers, 29 years old, having a real good season in Winnipeg where he's a better than point per game player. I love Nikolai Ehlers. That's a guy I would love to see in a Hawks uniform if they don't get a Rantanen or a Marner. Mikael Granlund, yeah, he's a little older, but still having a great season, 45 points. Now, obviously, with the Dallas Stars, given that he was traded from San Jose. Brad Marchand's a free agent this year. This is Jason Zucker, who's having a really nice bounce back year for 1 season. Claude Giroux, I pray to God he retires. Kyle Palmieri's having a nice year, all things considered in Long Island, Ryan Donato, but like Neil Pionk, Brock Besser, like there's a lot of really good players in this coming class. Jacob Chitrin, Sam Bennett, who's a guy I think would look awesome in a Blackhawks uniform, only 28 years old. Like he's going to get paid. Jack Roslovic is a nice player. 19 goals scored so far this year at age 28. There's a lot of opportunity for Davidson to make probably 2 or 3 strategic signings and not totally block anybody. And I think with that in mind, I'm excited because they got the cap space. They got it. And the cap's only going to rise. We learned that over the last couple of weeks, right? It's going to go up from, it's what, 88 million this year. So it's going to go up $7 million in one season. They're projecting it at about 95 and a half, I think. Then it's going to be 104 and then 113 and a half. Are you kidding me?
A huge jump.
Connor Bedard and Mikko Rantanen's hypothetical contracts would look hilariously stupid by year 3 because they would be cheap for the market, right? The market's just going to continue to go up with the salary cap. So I think this is a rare year of opportunity, in my humble opinion, for what the Hawks could do. And I think with that alone, it's kind of exciting because you kind of sit here and you wonder, what if? And I know we got a comment here from Stolik because Stolik expressed some terror, I guess, for lack of a better term, fear probably is a better word, about the Hawks goaltending situation. Arvid Soderblom's played really well. I think Arvid Soderblom has exceeded everybody's expectation. I think he can absolutely be part of the future. I know Stolik doesn't agree, which is totally fine. Mrazek looks done. Mrazek's got 1 more year under contract next year. Brossoit does as well. We haven't even seen Laurent Brossoit yet. And he had a really good last, 4 or 5 seasons before the Hawks signed him. So maybe he's a guy that gives you some opportunity there. But he asks, do they go after a guy like Aiden Hill or a guy like Demko? I think it's not out of the realm of possibility. I just don't think it's going to personally happen. I mean, I look right now at kind of the free agency crop. It's a good year of free agency goalies if you're really concerned about the position. Aiden Hill's obviously a big one. As a guy like Demko, but you've also got Vejmelka, I believe is how you say his last name, from Arizona. He'll be a free agent. Jake Allen's a free agent. Frederik Anderson. Some of these guys are a little older. Kevin Lankinen, Blackhawks legend, is a free agent. Alex Lyon's a free agent. Ilya Samsonov's a free agent. Anton Forsberg, who's actually been pretty good since he left the Hawks, ironically. He's a free agent. So, there are names. I wouldn't rule it out. I think they're going to give Brossoit a chance with a Soderblom and maybe buy out a guy like Mrazek. I could see happening before they, I think, sign a guy. I think they got a lot of eggs in the basket for a guy like Drew Commesso, as well as Adam Guyon, who obviously they just recently drafted. So I don't know if they're going to totally block that up. But maybe a guy like Vejmelka, who's 28 years old, maybe he comes on a 2-3 year deal. You never know. Goalie's a weird position in the NHL. It's like relief pitchers in baseball. 1 year you can be really good, and 1 year you can be shit, and then you can bounce back the next year and be really good again. I don't know. It's a goofy position, but it just kind of ends up that way.
Yeah, Ron, I'm gonna have to agree with you on the goalie situation. I mean, could it happen? Sure, but I just don't think that the Blackhawks need another veteran goalie right now. Because like with Laurent Brossoit, he's still gonna be here next year. And he'll hopefully, knock on wood, be healthy. Peter Mrazek
hopefully he plays this year.
Yeah, seriously.
He was supposed to be back in November.
Yeah, and it's February, so
yeah.
But Mrazek, I was hoping that he would kind of be somebody gone at the trade deadline if he was playing really good. I don't think that he's going to have a lot of value this year. And Soderblom, he's been playing far above people's expectations this season. And they're going to want to give him I think he's going to be playing in the NHL next year, like this year he has. Commesso, he'll be in Rockford for some time, and then Guyon, he's not having the best year. I think he's posting something like a .875 save percentage, but he's years away from like,
Yeah, he's in his first year in college hockey, so he's a while away yet before he becomes
he's still in the
part
hockey
of the
womb.
picture. Yeah, I like that analogy. That's good. He is very much in the hockey womb, especially from a goaltending perspective. But yeah, man, I think it's gonna be, again, it's gonna be fun. Like, I don't wish time away. I've as I've gotten older, I try not to be that person. But I would absolutely be lying to you if I didn't say I wasn't excited for the Hawks like draft and then free agency. I'd be a lying sack of shit if I didn't tell you that, because I am fired up. That is my
I'm
Christmas.
excited.
Yeah, July 1st is my Christmas morning. Like, I wake up and the first thing I do, I'm like on my phone. I'm like, who's going where? Because the reports start breaking before like guys can actually sign. So I'm just sitting there and I'm scrolling, and my fiance comes, what are you doing? I'm like, it's Christmas. It's Christmas. It's hockey. It's NHL free agency. My favorite time of the year. I love NHL free agency, but again, I'm also a nerd, and that's just what I do with my spare time. All right. We finally made it to the habituals. Again, it's our 10 episode, but again, we haven't been on the mic in 2 months, so we got a lot of shit to say. Ruffle some feathers. Steve, and your first ever Four Feathers podcast. Would you like to ruffle some feathers? Or would you like to politely pass? It's okay if you don't have one. Not everybody's always got to fire people up.
I don't know if I feel like most people feel the same about what I'm about to say. So I don't know if I'm probably ruffling somebody's feathers, but
love it.
After the U.S. Canada game on Saturday, there were some people who were upset about the fights that happened to start the game. I don't know. I think it was good for the NHL. Like, it got eyes on the game. It got people talking about the game. And I think the whole should fighting be involved in the NHL? That's I don't know, maybe a deeper conversation for another time. But that's a game that mattered to those guys. It's the decision that they made, even if it was a stage fight, and it got me fired up. I thought it was cool as shit. So I don't know. I think some people who are kind of against that was kind of a cheesy stage fight. They shouldn't have done it. I don't know. I think it was good for the league that day.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think there's always a place for fighting in hockey. I don't think it needs to be to the level that it once was, but sometimes it's been a part of the sport for a reason. This is not they want to make hockey glorified boxing. No. It's sometimes you need to shift the momentum, and in it's a physical sport, whether people like it or not. It's a contact sport. Hockey is a contact sport. If could you imagine how fucking boring hockey would be if there was no hitting?
Fall asleep.
It'd be pond hockey.
Yeah.
We're getting Paul Bissonnette bitching about Connor Bedard playing pond hockey on fucking TNT, and then people bitching about fight. That's what keeps it from being pond hockey. It's professional grown-ass men. They know what they're getting themselves into. They're fine. There's always a place. I agree. I like that ruffles and feathers. Yeah, there's always a place for fighting. I don't necessarily think it needs to happen all the time, but sometimes there's a place for it. And there was a lot of pent-up aggression.
Yeah.
I like it. It made a statement, and Team USA ate off that momentum, and they won the game. So look at it how you will. Speaking of the Four Nations game, we're on the same page tonight, my friend. My ruffle some feathers. I'm going to ruffle feathers for a different reason. Normally, I ruffle some feathers to try to piss people off. I'm not going to try to piss people off tonight. In fact, I'm probably going to say something that people are going to want me to say. And because of that, it's going to ruffle feathers for a different reason. If I'm Kyle Davidson, I'm calling the Ottawa Senators tomorrow, and I'm asking what the fuck it's going to cost to get Brady Tkachuk in a Blackhawks uniform. I'm doing it. Because let's be real, Matthew just signed a huge contract in Florida, a season ago? He's not leaving Florida. And he is a full no move. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be that dude's going to die a Panther, which good for him. I hope they win another cup. I love Alexander Barkov. I have for a long time. Aaron Ekblad's a free agent this year. You want to talk about a guy I'd love to see in a Blackhawks uniform? That's one of them. I remember talking to people back in the day when he was the number one overall pick, telling the people that the Hawks should trade up to number one to go get Aaron Ekblad. I remember it. It happened once upon a time. Love that guy. But Brady Tkachuk has 3 more years after this year. He's only 25. He's at 8.2 million, which is a fucking steal, in my opinion, for what he brings to the game. And he's their captain. So this is a guy that's a leader. Honestly, I'm going to say something. I'm going to ruffle some feathers.
Here it comes.
If the Blackhawks have a lottery pick this year, I would absolutely trade it for Brady Tkachuk.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's you ruffled my feathers, man. I don't know.
You were if you're Kyle Davidson, you were about to trade Columbus last year to move up to get Demidov, right? Because we all remember those reports. He was about to give an unprotected first-round pick this year to Columbus. So Columbus would have had the Hawks lottery pick. In a season that it's a lesser draft this year. People have said that. There's a reason people are willing to trade picks. New York gave up a first-round pick for JT Miller. They gave it up with no issues this year because this first round this year is not going to be as deep as years past. In a year where, especially if the Hawks get number one because of that Schrager kid, who they don't need another fucking defenseman. They have 9,000 defensemen. If the Ottawa Senators are sitting there going, we kind of like that guy, I would respond, same gesture, and go, cool, Brady Tkachuk would look great in Chicago. Because guess what? Ottawa's in a bit of cap trouble. Like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, Ottawa's fine. Ottawa does not have a ton of cap space. Josh Norris is making almost $8 million a year for the next godforsaken year. Stutzel's making over $8 million for a bunch of years. You know, yeah, you lose $6.5 million of Claude Giroux after this season, but they've got some other young guys they might want to pay. You know, you got Ridley Gregg. I don't even know who the fuck that guy is. He starts making 3.25 next year. Man, if I'm the Hawks, Linus Ullmark's getting a $3.25 million raise next year. If I'm Chicago, I am calling Ottawa right now and going, hey, remember when we sent you Alex DeBrincat and we did you a solid? Even though the Hawks have arguably come out on the better end of that deal compared to the two teams because he's no longer a Senator. And I would just ask, what will it take to get Brady Tkachuk in Chicago? And I would pay that price. And then when he's due for an extension, I would extend him for however fucking long he wants, for however much money he wants. Because the Hawks don't have a guy like that. They have nobody that's going to get them that. I want to see Brady Tkachuk in Chicago because he's the only one that's realistic because he doesn't have a no-move clause.
Yeah, I mean, like...
if the Hawks get 1, 2, 3, move it. I don't care. Send it to Ottawa. I don't ever want to see that pick ever again if it means Brady Tkachuk's in Chicago. Guess what? You know what you're getting with Brady Tkachuk. He's effectively your first-round pick at that point. There's no guy in this year's draft that they're going to get that's going to have the same impact as Brady Tkachuk in year one. And arguably, there's no guarantee that he's going to have the same impact in year 3.
But, so, I mean, he's 25 years old. Do you think
young.
That, like, with this year's draft pick, I would be hoping to pick somebody who could potentially be somebody who could play with Bedard? Is there anybody who could be that? I'm not sure, but that's what I would be kind of like praying for. I don't think Brady Tkachuk is that guy, and I don't know. I would love to have him on the Hawks. I just don't think like our lottery pick or any of the top 3 picks that we might get.
I'll tell you what right now. If you make, because I believe he's, what did they list him as? He's technically a winger. So Brady Tkachuk could play on Bedard's wing. And then you play two players like that with a guy like Teuvo Teravainen, who's responsible defensively and can set guys up. And then you go sign Mikko Rantanen on top of it, and the Hawks are back. I'm telling you, man. If I'm Davidson, I'm calling Ottawa tomorrow, and I'm going, what is this kid going to cost? Just tell me. Just tell me the price at least, and then I can mull it over for 3 months. Just give me what's the cost? Because God, he would look so good in Chicago. Could you imagine that kind of play? Andrew Shaw was beloved in Chicago for just being that hard-nosed, tough player, son of a bitch to play against. Brady Tkachuk's a tough son of a bitch to play against. Oh, but he also scores 75 to 85 points a year. Chicago, right now, would look awesome. Awesome. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Hawks have 37.2 million for Rantanen is what Stolet says in the comments. He also says he would trade for Ehlers tomorrow. I like Nikolai Ehlers. I think Nikolai Ehlers is a great player. Very, very big fan of his. So
sure.
that's my ruffle some feathers. I hope I ruffle their feathers. But I'm willing to trade the Hawks top pick this year for Brady Tkachuk. Straight up. If Ottawa would be dumb enough to do it, I'm here for it. Run it. Run it and don't even look back.
I'd be upset if that happened. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, I'd be stoked. I would be off the wall excited. It's funny. So the reason I say that because we got to get the stick taps and then we got to get the hell out of here because I've hijacked your night by keeping you on the mic. I texted Tony after that Saturday night game and I said, could you imagine both Tkachuks on the Blackhawks? I said, the only place in the league that could afford both of them is Chicago. And he went, don't you dare. And I was like, oh, I'm already going there. I'm dreaming about it because it would be awesome. I almost said something really outlandish too on Saturday night in that chat with him. I almost said like, yes, fuck it. Send Bedard to Florida and get Tkachuk. Just get both of the Tkachuks in Chicago right now. Right now. Get them in Chicago and let them run wild. Because it would be unbelievable hockey. Anyway, I'm gonna reel myself back in, but that's my ruffles and feathers. I think I ruffled your feathers successfully, and I might have ruffled some other people's. So I feel like
one of my headphones died because of it.
There you go. That's when you know it's good. Steve, one final one, a stick tap. Do you have any stick taps to give out? Obviously, the Hawks haven't played hockey for a week now, but any stick taps?
I had one. It was related to the Blackhawks doing a charity event with a kids' hospital. I can't remember specifics, so I'd love to find out more information. But I think my stick taps goes out to you guys for having me on the show because like long time listeners since you guys first started. So writing articles for you guys it's been awesome. Man. So I'm having a blast.
Hey, well, we're equally as happy and excited to have you as a part of the team. So I'll dish out a stick tap to you. I'll dish out a stick tap to all of our listeners. It's a Monday night. The Four Nations game, U.S. versus Sweden, was on while we were recording, and we still had awesome discussion in the comment section. A ton of listeners joining us. So shouts out to everybody, especially because we've been gone for a while, and it hasn't been because we wanted to be. It's just shit has happened. But guess what? Shit's correcting itself, and we're going to get this thing back on track. Steve, what do you say? We got to get to what's on tap next because there's 4 games that the Hawks have left to round out the month of February. So for context, we are recording this on February 17th. The next game is Saturday, which is the 22nd. The Hawks will play at Columbus to start after the Four Nations break. That is a 6:00 p.m. Central Time game. It will be on CHSN Plus. So if you already are pissed about CHSN, it's going to get even better because they're on the second channel of CHSN on Saturday. From there, then they're home on Sunday. It's a part of a back-to-back. They play the Toronto Maple Leafs at the United Center, their last home game of February. That is also one of those great 6:00 starts at the United Center. That'll be on CHSN. I will be in attendance at that game. Very excited for that one. The last 2 Hawks Leafs games I have attended in person was the Kane Matthews back and forth game and the Black Friday Kevin Korchinski OT winner against Toronto.
Oh,
so real good hockey games against the Maple Leafs at the UC. Very excited about that one. And then from there, Steve, they come out in your direction. They're in Utah on Tuesday. So that'll be the 25th of February. That is an 8:00 Central Time start, also on CHSN. And then on Thursday, which is the 27th of February, so second to last day of the month, it is a 9:00 Central Time start on CHSN, but they are in Vegas. And that's how they'll round out the month. And then they're in Anaheim on March 1st. And they're back at the UC on March 3rd to take on the LA Kings. And that gets us pretty much caught up with the schedule and gives us things to look forward to and to be excited about talking about. Steve, yeah, fuck it. We're going to do it anyway. Predictions. 4 games coming out of the break. What's the record for the Hawks in those 4 games?
Man, I want to be optimistic and say that they're going to be 2-2, but going off of how they came out of the Christmas break and they kind of had a rough start with the Winter Classic and all that. I'm going to say they get 1 win out of the next 4. gonna be a little negative, and I think they're gonna get a win against. I'm gonna say for some reason they're gonna pull out of those weird wins where they play against a team way better than them, and they get a win against Toronto. But I
like
think
that.
the other ones are gonna be L's.
Okay.
What about you?
So you think what are we going? 1-3?
Yep.
1-3 for you in the next 4. Okay. I'm just tracking it. I wanna see how well we do here. I don't hate the 1-3. You know what's funny? I'm gonna stick with what I have here from our last show. It was my prediction for the next 4 games at that time. And I'm gonna hold true. They've been going to overtime way too goddamn much lately for me to not think they're gonna go 1-2-1 in the next 4. To me, that just screams Blackhawks hockey. I agree with you. I think they win against Toronto. For some reason, I think they're going to beat the Maple Leafs. Obviously, Marner, Nylander, Matthews, all been playing in the 4 Nations, right? They're not well rested. This entire Hawks roster outside of Teuvo Teravainen is well rested. It's a back-to-back, but they're only playing in Columbus and then coming home. It's at the UC. It'll be the first game back. Should be pretty good. Again, original 6 matchup. I agree with you. I think that's their win. I think they lose to Columbus in overtime. And then I think they get their shit stomped on the West Coast when they go play Utah in Vegas.
Yep.
I think that's what ends up happening. So I'm going to go 1-2-1. You're going to say 1-3. We'll see if any of us get any points. Tony is still our leader. He has 3 correct on the season, where he's nailed them on the dot, which we haven't gotten a ton of, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Steve, final thoughts before we sign off?
No, just anybody listening, make sure you tune in on Thursday, watch some great hockey. So don't forget, U.S. versus Canada.
Yeah, that's a game that's like, if you're a person that can only tune in if you're like out with your friends type thing, like call your buddies, find a bar, and go watch. Hell, go to B-Dubs and get some wings and watch the game. Like, that's the level of, like, this is going to be an incredible hockey game. I'm excited for it. I've already warned my fiance that game's going to be on. So I'm excited. I think she's excited. Maybe not. I don't know. But nonetheless, it's going to be good hockey. I totally agree with you. My only encouragement, if people haven't already, is to follow you at Dirty Third 81 on the socials. We'll be back next week. Tony will be with us, so it'll be the full 3 of us. Very excited to see Tony on the microphone again. It's been a while. Him and I haven't done a show in a long time in any capacity. But this was a fun one, man. Season 6, episode 15, extended time off for more reason than one. It's not just talking about the Blackhawks, talking about us as well. But we're back, and we're going to be in a pretty regular cadence throughout the rest of the year. We'll take our little hiatus probably in April and May, like we always do. And then, of course, we'll be back as we get a little closer to draft time, and then, of course, free agency before we wane on with the rest of the summer. As always, follow us at 4 Feathers Pod on the socials. Head over to YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell button over at On Tap Sportsnet. When all of our shows go live, including us here at 4 Feathers and all the other great content that we put out. Our Bulls on Tap crew was live tonight. I believe our Golf on Tap crew was live tonight. It was a busy night here at On Tap Sportsnet. So check all that out over on the YouTube and at ontapsportsnet.com. Steve, this was an absolute blast. We popped your 4 Feathers cherry. This will be a regular occurrence, so everybody gets to see you and your electric mustache from here on out.
Oh, yeah.
And again, Tony Marchese will be back with us here on our next show, a 90-minute show to come back. That's a hell of a night. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate everybody else tuning in as well. This was a lot of fun. And what do you say, buddy? Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.